listening to Voices of IFES, where we speak with people from around the IFES Fellowship about all things student ministry.
Welcome to Voices of IFES. For this new episode, I have a special guest. He's been within IFES for a very long time, and he's known with a lot of people. So it's Werner. Hello. I don't know if I say your name well.
Hi, Eva.
Do you say Werner? Werner?
Yeah, you can call me Werner or you can call me Werner. It doesn't matter.
Okay. So could you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, my name is Werner. As you said, I was raised in a Christian home. I am a twin and I have four siblings. And I come from a very rural background in Bavaria, in southern Germany. Yes, I studied sports and Latin, and I did some theological studies at university and at a seminary. And currently I'm working with IFES Eurasia in the field of pioneering and formation. And my hobbies are hiking and biking and all kinds of sports.
So there are some things that you experienced when you were younger and they had a big impact on you. So could you share about that a little bit?
Yeah, I had the privilege that I was in that Christian family background. It was not a narrow-minded Christian background. There was a lot of freedom in our family. But from very first years of my childhood, I was very much interested in world mission. And that came also from my grandparents. In their house, you were breathing missionary air. So they knew so much about mission field and they were listening to many news from the mission field, and they shared a lot. And so I got interested. And as far as my memories go back, I was always a believer and I loved Jesus and I loved the scripture. And during the teenage years, I had one question that was haunting me. And that was the question, what will stay on? What will not perish? What is big enough to give my life for? And this question was in my mind day and night. And in that time, there was a spiritual revival going on all over the world or in many places of the world. And that came also to our village. That was at the beginning of the 70s, the Jesus People movement. And it was a time when many young people turned to God. And as a result, inspired by these Christians, we started, my brother and my sister and a few others, we started a prayer meeting every night, 5 times a week. And we were praying for spiritual revival in our village. And step by step, one after the other, became a believer and a follower of Jesus. And many of them are still committed Christians and are my good friends. Yeah, so I saw that God is responding to prayer. And I think another main experience was I had several extreme experiences where I felt actually I should be dead, but God somehow had protected me from death. And I saw that this is an obligation to give my life to God with everything. And I had this feeling that I don't belong any longer to myself. And that was also proved by scripture in 1 Corinthians 6 that showed me, yes, actually, I don't want to live any longer for myself. I want to follow what God has in mind. And maybe another point was I had a principle at that time, and that was whatever some sisters and brothers ask you to do, you will do at least once. So I had this feeling I should give God a chance to lead me out of my own boundaries and beyond my self-limitation. Because I'm an introvert, and I could easily say I have never done this. I don't feel gifted enough, and I felt I have to give God a chance. And the best thing is to do things that are actually a challenge. Yeah, and I think that's why one story of the Bible spoke very much to me. That was Peter, when he was stepping out of the boat in the storm, and Jesus coming on the lake, and he challenged him and said, "Come." And I would say this is one of my main themes of my life. This invitation of Jesus, come to me. And every challenge, everything that I call you out to do something new, is actually an invitation to come closer to me. And so I understand as a treasure that new challenges are actually an invitation to have new experiences with Jesus. And I like this very much. Okay, that's it, maybe.
And so how did you end up working with IFES from like this time you were a child and you had all those realization and then now?
Yeah, IFEs. Actually, the first contact to IFEs was during my high school time. In 1973, few Christians, gathered together and we said, we want to start a prayer group at our high school. And so we went to the rector and he gave permission. And then we had daily devotions and prayer in the high school. And this meeting is still taking place in that school. And later we found out there is a high school ministry of SMD, the German wing of IFES. And we got connected with this work. And that was my first encounter with IFEs in Germany. And because some of my friends went after their teenage years for studies to university, and they had been already in touch with IFE's work in that university, I also started to go to the German SMD from the very first day of my studies. So I was involved all of my days of my studies in that ministry. And it was a time of real growth, because I had to learn to reason my faith to people who were agnostics or communists. I learned new ways of evangelism, like international student ministry or organizing a Christian book table or evangelistic Bible studies or evangelistic camps. And we did a lot learning by doing. And we did not have a staff worker who was living all the time with us, but only sometimes a staff worker came to visit us and to see how we are doing. Yeah, and of course, I did, after my studies, I did my work. I finished my education by 2 years at the school. So I was working as a teacher for sports and Latin for 2 years. And in that time, I was always thinking about what is my calling. I felt all those years God calls me to the mission field. So I tried to get in touch with a mission agency, but they did not actually need a teacher for sports and Latin. And so I was disappointed when I got a negative response. And 3 weeks later, a staff worker of the German movement asked me if I want to come on staff. And that was, for me, God's calling. And I knew this is what I should do now. This is my calling. And so I was working for 10 years in the region of Bavaria, traveling from city to city, supporting the ministry, organizing camps together. And I loved this work. And after 10 years, I had the feeling something new should begin. And in that time, the IFES General Secretary, Lindsay Brown, several times dissed me and asked, when are you coming to IFES? And he offered me to start a ministry in Georgia, in Caucasus region. That is a country between Europe and Eurasia and Asia. And that was my first contact with IFES. And then I thought I should have a visit to investigate how is the situation actually there. And that was an interesting moment because Georgia was at that time right after civil war. The country had gone through a real deep crisis. And a friend of mine had been in the country a few times before, and he was traveling on December 94 to Georgia and said, you could just join me and observe how things are there. So I wanted to meet him at the airport, but the guy who did not show up was my friend. So I was just given a photograph of someone I should look for. And so I sat into the aircraft, sat down in the aircraft and was flying somewhere into the nowhere. I had no clue. I had nothing prepared. I did not know if I will stay somewhere. I had not much money with me. I had just completely relied on my friend. And now I found myself all alone, did not know the language nor anything, had no idea about the country because I just came there for curiosity to find out what's going there. And so after all, I found a guy who finally I understood he's the right person, and he took me to his home. And then the next days we were traveling to eastern Georgia. And there I had an interesting encounter. I was in a Bible school and I had to give the lectures that my friend was supposed to give. So fortunately, I had a few papers I had taken with me. So I gave a 4 hours lecture at that Bible school. And after that, I went out. And then while I was standing outside in the snow, a farmer came up to me, and he was very interesting man. He had very bright eyes. He was coming closer and closer and closer to me. And suddenly, right before me, he stopped, looked deep into my eyes, had a very friendly face. And when he did not say anything, but I heard in that moment the word, come over and help us. And I knew this comes from God, because I did not look for a word from God, but it just came into my mind. And as I had heard that word, the farmer turned around and he walked away. So I felt this as a confirmation that God is calling me to Georgia. And we asked also a church there, and the church also said, I think it's a good idea to start a student ministry. I came home and said to my wife, there was no electricity in the country and there was no gas available for cooking. There was no central heating working. And when I wanted to wash my face in a bowl in the morning, the water there was frozen. But I think God calls us into that country. And she said, okay, then let's go. That was how I came to IFES.
She must love you so much.
Yes, I hope so. I think so.
If you need a proof, you have it. And how did you go in your ministry in Georgia, and how long did you stay there?
Yeah, we stayed there for uh, for 6 years, and we started in January 96. Arrived in Tbilisi. It is an Orthodox country, so with very strict and strong traditions, very people who are very nationalistic, very proud of their nation. On the other hand, very hospitable people, because the guest is usually regarded to be sent by God. So it's good to be a guest. and at that time there were almost only Orthodox people in the country, or in some parts of the country also Muslim. And anything that was not Orthodox was regarded as a cult. So, and it was hated as a cult. And when we landed, we came or we were taken to an old lady living with her daughter. They spoke Russian and Georgian, and we were speaking German and English. And they were very poor. The lady had received her flat by the help of an angel, and she had made a vow that whenever missionaries would come to Georgia, she would make space in her flat for them. And so we were the first missionaries coming to Georgia in her flat. And we found that out later, and we saw that God had prepared that place for us long before we knew that we will go to Georgia, because that lady had made that vow, and she was one of the Baptist believers in the country. And so she was a key person. And we had no clue that she exists. And so God was connecting us. It was his design, his way of community happen, that there is unity and fellowship. Yeah, it was also at that time very dangerous to live in the capital, because every week, in the average, 3 foreigners were knocked down and robbed. And some Baptist churches were even burned down by radical priest and his mob, and so Orthodox priest. And Christians or Jehovah Witnesses were beaten up when they were gathering. So these mob came in and they had wooden crosses, and they were beating the people with the crosses. They were shaving sometimes the beards of the men, which was very shameful for them. And sometimes in the hospital, the doctors refused to treat the victims of that assault. And so it was every day we prayed that God will protect us. So that was the very start. And then we gathered about 3 months later, we gathered students in our flat. We finally had found a flat, and we had usually about 100 students per week coming to our flat for different events. So we had Bible studies, we had social events going on, we had training sessions, and step by step we were trying to find out how to do pioneering work. We had no clue what is the best way to do. And we often followed trial and error. We once had meeting in the Orientalistic Institute. It was a social meeting that was followed by a Bible study. And after 3 meetings, we were kicked out because we were a cult. And so the university closed the doors. And there was at that time no other place where you could meet. So no cafe was working, nothing did work. And that's why we had to go to a Baptist church in winter without heating. That was really cold. And a few students only were left over because all the non-believers did not dare to enter a Baptist building. And so God showed us that we should turn away from evangelistic work to training people. And that was the first year, mainly the first things that we did. Train a new generation of young people, help them to understand what is the center of the gospel, how to share the gospel, how to get along with critical people, so apologetic issues. And so step by step, we became friends of those students, and they started to trust us. And we have up to now very good connections to people of this first hour of these first meetings. And it's very exciting to look back and to see how they have been developing. One thing that God gave us were key people. It's amazing to see how many good people were in that group that started. There were, of course, people who came and left, and next people came and left. So there were a lot of people who were not faithful. But there was a very strong, committed group of people who wanted to live for Christ and who wanted to share that vision of that IFES has, and they wanted to give their lives for that. And they are supporting the ministry up to now, and it's a blessing that God brought us in touch with those key people. One of these person was Nino, the first staff worker and then the first general secretary of the movement. And she was so gifted and so dedicated to the Lord. And it was just a joy to see how she is developing. At that time, we understood also that the churches had not a high opinion of young people. So people were regarded as spiritual according to the years they had spent in church. And so Nino asked if she could become a Sunday school teacher. She had studied theology and she had studied history, so she was the ideal person. And I saw when she came out of that room, walking down, and she said, "They did not permit me. I'm too immature." And she was much more mature than all the teachers who were there in that Sunday school class. And so she came down, and I asked her, "Do you want to come on staff with IFES?" And after prayer and time of consideration, she said yes. Yep. So you see, she was not qualified to be a Sunday school teacher. She was thrown out, and they did not see that she's the future general secretary of the movement because she was so gifted. And we saw that often, and therefore we understood we have to train up this new generation. It's important that they understand the gospel and the essence of the gospel, and that they will also have a different view of leadership than it was at that time in the church.
And did they support her in her role as a general secretary? And did it recognize the local IFES movement?
Yeah, it took some time. It took some time to accept her as a staff and as a general secretary. And it was very difficult in that male dominated culture to have a woman in leadership. So it was not easy for her. And it is for many of our young staff or for our general secretaries in all over Eurasia. It is very difficult because women in leadership, that is not something these cultures are well known for. Because most of these countries are either very Orthodox or they are Muslim country. And of course, in the Muslim tradition, the women don't have many rights. Yeah, and so we started to train up people, and these young people, after 1 year, 1.5 years, yeah, they became the evangelists. So they were able to do evangelism much better than us. And that was wonderful to see how they were founding Bible study groups, how they were involved in evangelistic camps, and how they were involved in personal evangelism. One girl, for example, she was a student of German language, and she became a believer because we had been teaching at the Foreign Language Institute, and she was interested in German language. And because of that, she joined also a German Bible study group, and so she became a believer. And then all her 3 sisters also became believers. And she had many pupils that she was teaching German. And when they became students, she took all of them to the student ministry. And so many of them became believers as well. So it was interesting how God was training up her and using her. And I think it was because she was very honest. One day she called me and said, "How would you translate this word?" And I said, I would translate it in this way in German. And I said, why do you ask? She said, I'm doing work for someone of my classmates, and I get paid for that, and so I actually do her work. And I said, this is the best way how to ruin your country, because you are all the time complaining about all the bribes in the country, and you live the same life as a Christian. She came from a very poor family, and she needed that money, of course. But I was very strict with her. And I said, this does not fit together. And next day she came, she had a list with about 30 names, and she showed it to us. And I said, what is this list? And she said, these are all people I have been cheating to. And I will go to each one of them and apologize. And so she did. And I was so amazed about that, that commitment, that the commitment to God means to live now a different lifestyle. And I think because of that, also God used her in many ways.
Do you want to share with me what happened after Georgia? Where did you go, and how did you feel like it was coming to an end?
After about 5 years, we felt that there is now time to hand over the responsibility in Georgian hands. And there was one staff worker, and we had one general secretary. We had started a board. They had no clue what a board is, but at least there was a board. And and we knew they can take over. And so I made the commitment to work alongside Nino for at least half a year, and to help her to develop as a general secretary. And so I did that. And then I understood we have to go home. We have to kick her out of the nest. She needs to learn to fly and to do the ministry according to her gifts and in the way that she thinks is the right thing. And also we saw that our kids have to go to school, and we did not find a school where we could put them, because the only good school was they charged $1,000 per month per kid, and that was something, an astronomical amount of money for us. So we said no. I think we go back, and our kids will go to a German school in Germany. Yeah. And after that time, I was working for a longer period as a coordinator of the sub-region Caucasus. That were the countries Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. Armenia and Azerbaijan are two very different countries. Armenia is also Orthodox. Azerbaijan is Muslim, and both countries were at that time in war and are still in war with each other. And so no one may go from one side to the other side. It's impossible. So we had a lot of conferences for all three countries, and we had them all in Georgia to connect these movements with each other. And after that time, when a new regional secretary came, we changed the organization of our ministry, and we stopped the sub-regional coordination, and we decided to have champions that will care for the different fields of the ministry in all over Eurasia. And so I was given the task to start to be responsible for pioneering ministry and for student leader formation something that I had been doing from 2004 in that region. And that was a new challenge for me, because now I had to leave my well-known sub-region. I have been often in Azerbaijan, in Armenia, and of course in Georgia. And we started to pray for the Central Asian republics. They are all Muslim countries. And in some of these countries, we have an existing ministry, but at least in 3 countries, there is no ministry at all. And there has been no ministry for many years. So we often prayed for these white spots on our map. And we did that also at conferences again and again. And then one day, God pointed me to one of those countries. As a friend said to me, he got to know a guy who is from IFES Brazil, and he's a professor in a university of that country. And I thought, wow, that's a good connection. Let's call him. I did. And he shared with me that he has a Christian from Romania in his classroom. Wow, I said, very interesting. Can you connect me with that Christian? Yes, he said, it's a girl. Okay, I called her, and I found out she has a calling to do student ministry, and that's why she went all alone from Romania into that country to start student ministry, to learn the language, and to start building friendships. And so when I listened to her story, I said, I have to come. And so I visited her, and she arranged a lot of meetings with different registered and unregistered churches, so underground churches, usually small groups of people. And that was my first time that we were sharing the vision of student ministry in that country. After at least 20 years, there was no student work going on in that country. By God's grace, we came to the conclusion we should invite students who are believers to our conference. And so this girl from Romania said she will work with all the locals together, and she will gather people, and I should care for a team. So I was caring for a team. It was mainly students from Belarus and Ukraine. And then the war in Ukraine broke out, and all 50% of my team broke away because they could not leave the country. And the lady, the girl from Romania, got sick and had to go home. So again, a very tricky situation. And God pointed me again to a lady. I should call her, someone said, and she was like being put by God into that place for helping us. So she immediately understood when I said student ministry. She said, I wanted to do that all my lifetime. Wow, I said, that's interesting. And then she introduced me to the main leader, Christian leader in the country, to other key leaders in the country. And she said, I will invite all the students and I will care for everything. And I thought, she does not know me. I don't know her. Why does she do all that? And I understood step by step, she is completely dedicated to the kingdom ministry, and she wants people to come to the Lord, and she wants this nation to be transformed. And that's why she invested so much. Yeah, and through her, we were able to run now 3 years a conference, inviting students. Some students came for the third time, some for the second time, some for the first time in this summer. And the pastors more and more trusted us. And this summer we had the feeling it was a breakthrough, because now we have 2 groups meeting at 2 different cities. And they are not very strong yet. They are quite unstable, but they meet and they have a vision. And our team is supporting all those staff, those students. They are doing mentoring. They help them with material, Bible study material. We have found a great pool of support now, and the great news is that we have now a kind of intern. She is for 3 months. For 3 months, she's a trainee in another Central Asian country where we have ministry, and hopefully she will come back and one day be staff, and build the ministry. Yeah, so we are very grateful to see how God is giving this heart for evangelism into the students, and that they are no longer shy and withdrawing, but they are this year for the first time. They meet regularly, and they are thinking about how to reach the new generation for the gospel.
Can I ask you to share something that you lived that really marked you throughout those years of ministry?
Yeah, I can remember one story. From Georgia, I would start with a guy. He was Hare Krishna, devoted to Hare Krishna. He had been very much in all these Eastern religions, and he was in a Bible study group that Nino had started for Russian-speaking students. And he was a fan of John Lennon and one of the Beatles guys. And he was dressed as John Lennon, and he knew all the songs, and he played also very well all these songs on his guitar. And he was regularly in the Beatles club in Tbilisi and made some money there. And so this guy came once on a Friday in one of our social meetings that we had in the free time between the 2 semesters. And he liked it. And next Friday we had a retreat for all the students who were believers. But this guy, his name is Arkadik, he showed up again on Friday and thought, wow, he should not be here. And when we had finished with the Bible study, he took his guitar and played all the Beatles songs. And I thought, he actually should really not be here. He destroys the spiritual atmosphere. And so when they left, I told him, tomorrow you should not come, because this is a internal thing what we are doing, and we are planning the semester, and it is absolutely boring. And in the morning I opened the door and Arkadik is standing outside smiling, and I want to join, he said. I thought, no way, how can I get rid of him? And the same procedure as in the day before, we had planning meeting, Bible study, and he started his Beatles songs, and I felt, no, I have to care for tomorrow to be sure that he does not come again. So I gave him a booklet and I said, this is about how to give your life to Jesus, how to turn to Jesus. It was in Russian. And I said, you should read it tomorrow. But the problem was, he read it in the night. And next morning he came, we had a service. We were actually blessing the students who were taking leadership in the next semester. And we were praying for them. We had Holy Communion. I was glad that he did not take part in it. And then when almost everything was over, he stepped into the middle of the room and said, I want to become a Christian now. And I thought, what did he say? And one of our staff, she was student at that time, very, very gifted evangelist. She took her arm under his arm and said, oh, that's very nice, Arkadik. I am very happy. Why do you want to become a Christian? And he said, of course, because my sin, I want to be forgiven. I lived not a good life, and I want to start a new life. And Larissa said, no, that is not enough. That's wonderful to start with that, but that's not enough. And he looked at her and said, what else? And she said, if you want to be a Christian, you have to follow Jesus, and you have to make Jesus your Lord of your life, and not just to receive forgiveness. And he said, of course, that's what I want, and I better pray now. And he started to pray and to give his life to Jesus in front of everyone. And we were so shocked. And that was the turning point of his life. And we had a conference a little bit later, and he brought all his posters of John Lennon, and he put all these posters into the stove, and burned it. And someone wanted to get one of these posters. He said, no, everything goes to the fire. And he changed a lot. And it was a radical change. And he's up to now a pastor. in one of the churches. So it was a real transformation, and it was good to see how God brought him to faith despite of me and despite my little expectations that I had in him. It was very humbling experience, and I was so grateful to see how God continues to work in his life. Yeah, that is one experience. Do you want to have another one?
Well, you always have good stories. You can do another one.
Yeah, another one is that happened at the first conference that we had in Central Asia. And on the last day, a pastor from the region, he came to us. We had not invited him, and he brought a student, and he told me, "You can talk to him in German. He's going for studies to Austria." And so I had only half an hour to talk a little bit to him, and I was thinking, okay, again, he's actually now disturbing us. We want to have a good final evening, and now this guy comes in. But later I found out that I had his phone number. I got in contact with him, and I connected him with the Austrian student ministry, and he immediately attended their first conference. He immediately was in all the meetings that they offered, and he developed so much as a believer in that city. It was amazing. After 1 year, he had become an elder in the church, and he was appointed as the leader of the student ministry in his city. And he's a very close friend now to me. And his brother is now coordinating a student ministry in the capital of that country. And so it's so good to see how sometimes God, by his plan, brings people together, and he has purposes with the people he puts into our lives. Yeah, and so he is amazing. He's preaching in church. He has been a Bible teacher at our last formation at one Bible study, and I'm so grateful to be involved in those people's life, and to see how God is developing people and is expanding his kingdom, and that he transforms young people and makes them a special tool in his kingdom.
God
Yes.
is so powerful.
Yeah, another one. She comes from the closest country in that region, absolutely closed for Christians. And she became a believer in another Eurasian country. And then she could not go back to her country, and she was going to a Bible school in England. And then she got to know her boyfriend from South Africa. And then she tried all kinds of ways to find a job. But she also felt God is calling her to start international student ministry in Georgia, in one of the cities. And So this girl is now in Georgia, and she came without any money. She came to Georgia just believing in God, just trusting that somehow, miraculously, she will get money. And so she started her first steps a few weeks ago, and she is already gathering international students, and she has started Bible study for them and some other outdoor activities with them. And it's so amazing. It's such a pleasure to watch God at work.
Oh, so good. Thank you for sharing those stories. So to finish, could you tell me how we can support you in your ministry?
Yeah, support is always welcome. Yeah, so I think we need support in prayer for the small beginnings. The work is still very fragile. There is no leader there. There is no staff there. And so we are immensely grateful for what has uh, for what God has done, but we need more. We need more support and prayer. And I think we should pray for local staff that God will raise the right person. Or we could pray for international workers of IFES going to Central Asia. We have a need in many of these countries that there is a lack of new support from other countries. It's so exciting to live in Central Asia. It's it's transforming. You will not stay the same, and we are praying for people who would give themselves for several years to one of these countries. You can give also to IFES. To when you go to the website, you will find Eurasia, and you can give with the destination pioneering, and then this money will go to pioneering ministry in IFES Eurasia. And we have in November a consultation on pioneering in one of the countries, and we bring together students and staff from Eurasian countries to take part in that consultation. And we are so excited that it will take place. And because we saw that in the first consultation, 2019, there came 2 students from Russia, and they are both now a staff worker. One is general secretary, the other one staff worker. So we have good and hopeful expectations that something new will start with that consultation. And you can pray for success of my ministry. I will not stay forever here.
And we will put the link in the description of this podcast for the link to give for pioneering in Eurasia. So it's easier for you to find. And
Okay,
yeah,
that's
thank
very
you.
nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Werner, for sharing all of that. And I hope that those stories will be inspiring for people. It inspired me and it's giving me hope for my personal ministry. So I hope it will do the same for people listening. And yeah, if anyone listening is feeling called to ministry in Central Asia, yeah,
That
Central,
would be to Central Asia. Yeah.
yeah.
It would be wonderful, and I hope that this would be the result at least that someone, if one is gets interested in that ministry, that would be exciting.
Yeah. Well, we'll pray for that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I hope people listening enjoyed this podcast. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to share it to other people that you think they would enjoy it as well. And thank you so much, Werner.
Yeah, you are welcome. It was a joy to have that time with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Voices of IFES. Follow us on your favourite podcast platform to hear more interviews like this one today. If you want to hear stories of how students are transforming their campuses around the world, subscribe to Prayer Line, our weekly newsletter with inspiring stories to help you pray for student movements. You can go to ifesworld.org to subscribe or follow us on Instagram and Facebook to listen to stories in audio form.